executive.
Yeah.
Just give it to the school.
All right, let's go over this.
Nothing.
Here, put your name on it.
Are we turning them in or talking?
I'm gonna talk about it.
The United States, perfect view.
It's okay. I'll get it back in a second.
Wait, with this one, I have representation for that, I put it on here.
It's okay.
She meant to say without representation.
All right, so what were the Christian principles found in the Declaration of Independence? Anyone?
Unalienable rights endowed by God. That's all.
Okay.
Endowed by the Creator.
Okay. So on line 4, right, it says the laws of nature and nature's God. Right. So the belief in a supreme being, a belief in a deity. Right. What's another one? Somebody already said it. What?
All people are created equal.
Okay, but what part of how does biblically, or what biblical principle comes from that statement? All men are created equal.
That there's no one person that is in charge of them all, like a king.
Okay, so that's equality. But more specifically, that statement, all men are created equal. What biblical principle is
We're all
clearly
sinners.
stated? What?
We're all sinners.
Created in the image of God.
Created. The Bible talks about that we were created, right? So just the fact that we were created, right? It also says they are endowed by their Creator certain inalienable rights. What does that line mean? Endowed by their Creator certain inalienable rights.
There's certain rights that we have that shouldn't be taken away from people.
Okay, not that shouldn't be taken away, but who are they given by?
God.
They're given by God, right? And you see at the end of, that, I believe it's the end of, at the end of that paragraph, it says that governments are instituted among men, right, to protect these rights that are given by God. All right, another biblical thing that we can draw from the Declaration of Independence. Biblical principle at the end. Hint, it's on the last page. The last page, Rudy, of the Declaration of Independence.
Thanks for clarifying.
Right, but you're wrong.
No, she didn't know. How about this? We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assemble, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world. Right? What is it? What is that saying? What biblical statement is it? What?
God is above.
Okay, but specifically, I mean, it's stated in the sentence that God is.
Supreme.
God is supreme.
The
Just.
judge of the world.
He's a judge, right? Now, how does our government obtain, where does our government obtain from this? Right? Isaiah 33:22. I don't know if you guys have, if you remember that from U.S. history. Isaiah 33:22. What is Isaiah 33:22? God is our King, our lawgiver, and our judge. Those are the three branches of the United States government, right? The legislative, executive, and judicial. They come from that verse. We're separating the powers of God. Okay, but this says that God is our judge. And then lastly, the protection of divine providence. At the end of that paragraph, the end of the page on number 8, page 8, line 34, it says, and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, saying that God is behind us. Okay? If you will, God is our defense. Now, let's move into the pre-assessment questions, right? What are some of the purposes of the Constitution laid out in the preamble?
It's a government formed by the people for the people. And then
Okay.
another something with the people.
Okay, that's not a purpose of the Constitution, right? But that is what we call popular sovereignty. A government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Okay? Right? Meaning that a government is for the people. What are some of the things that are laid out in the preamble? We just said them. Jose said there were 6.
Creed.
A more perfect union. Real quick, I just want to stop there. We don't think that we're going to become perfect. We don't think our government could be perfect. Okay? So it's a more perfect union. Establish justice. Another. What's tranquility?
Peace.
Okay, so ensure domestic peace. Peace means peace within our country. Okay? Provide for the common defense. Very good. That means a military, right? Police, right? Hosea?
Promote general welfare.
Okay, it doesn't say provide general welfare. It says promote it, right? Okay? Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We do ordain and establish this Constitution.
Dear Sanders.
Okay?
Sanders got asked a question. It was like, you want the government to take over all of Medicare? And then he was like, no, I just want more Medicare. It would, you have to watch the clip. He just basically restates the question in a different way. He's like, he's trying to take the government.
Yeah. All right. What were a few of the grievances? We're not going to spend too much time on these because there's a lot of them. What are grievances?
Things happen to
Problems.
someone.
Right, yeah, problems. What were some of the grievances against
Taxes.
King George III and British Parliament? Not just taxes.
Taxes without representation.
What's that? Quartering soldiers, taxation without representation.
Something like he made the judges have their judgment only listen to him, and he had control of the judge.
Okay, yeah. So, if you will,
He made judge
biased-
depend on his role alone for
A
the 10-year
biased-
offices.
judicial system.
Yeah, he basically just says he paid off the judges to do whatever he said.
All right, I want you guys to look at. He says, he's combined with others, talking about Parliament, to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and acknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Right? What does this mean? Pretended legislation. What do the colonists consider themselves to be?
Subjects of the king.
What nation is that?
English.
English. They think of them as Englishmen, right? They think of themselves as Englishmen, right? There's no American, there's no U.S. citizen, there's Englishmen. That's who they are. So, what if the government, the federal government, made a law in Congress, they passed a law legally that said Californians have to pay 75% tax. Only Californians. Right? Why would that be wrong?
Because
We didn't have a say in it.
What?
We didn't have a say in it.
Well, we did, but, I mean, these people didn't have a say, but we do have a part in Congress. Why would that be wrong? Why would we be upset about that?
It goes against our constitutional rights.
Not necessarily. If they vote on it, they can make a law. Why is it wrong that they only tax us?
It's discriminatory.
Okay, right? They're singling us out. And so in this document, they say that we are an object. If you look on page 6, I want everybody to look on page 6, line number 3, starting in line 2. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object. That object is talking about the United States. All of their abuses are basically focused at us. Now, if they made a law that the whole country had to pay these taxes, I don't think the United States, the colonies, they wouldn't have separated if all of England had to pay these taxes. But it was just the colonies. These laws were made specifically tailored for the colonies. This is what upsetted them. Okay, so you have to understand that. That's a part of it. All right. So there's a lot of abuses. You just read through them. What were some of the fundamental principles of American democracy that were derived from the works of writers such as John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, Thomas Paine, and included into the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution? Do you guys remember any of their work? It's okay. Anything at all from those guys? Any ideas? We're talking about ideas, like this is a revolution, right? The ideas that brought about the American Revolution. Okay. All right. Okay. Self-government. That's some of the founding fathers' ideas, right? How about like, should a king have all the power?
No.
No. So how should the power be?
King under the law.
Okay, that was Magna Carta, right? But what is the Constitution? What is the Declaration of Independence suggesting that we do with power?
Give it to the people.
No, the people have the power and they've given it to the government, is what it says. They're deriving their power from the people, right? What do you do if a king has all the power, right? He can do whatever he wants, right? So how can you fix that problem? How did Montesquieu suggest that we fix that problem? You can see it in our Constitution. Does anybody have all the power? So what did we do to the power?
Checks and balances.
Okay, we separated the power. There's a separation of powers. This is a key tenet of the Constitution. The separation of powers. Okay? Other one, John Locke talked about how against the divine right of kings. That kings don't have supreme power. That supreme power comes from, as we read in the Declaration of Independence, who's the supreme power? God. Okay? So, it's very important to understand these ideas because the revolution is a revolution of ideas. And we're going to learn about that today. Okay? Just before we get started, some of the learning objectives that you guys should be taking from the day. Students should be able to explain the fundamental principles and moral values of American democracy as expressed in the U.S. Constitution and other essential documents of American democracy. All right? So, no, you're going to do that. Students will be able to read and analyze the Declaration of Independence and search for the Christian elements of the document. If you were to read it again, do you think you'd be able to find them? The Christian elements, the four that we just talked? Okay. Students will be able to know what self-evident truths laid out in the Declaration of Independence are. Students will be able to explain the grievances against the individual rights by King George III in the British Parliament. Students will be able to compare and contrast the American Revolution to the Glorious Revolution, the French Revolution, specifically how the American Revolution was a revolution not made, but prevented. And lastly, students will be able to read essential documents of American democracy and identify the fundamental principles within those documents. All right, so let's get to it. The preamble, we've already stated it several times, okay? Just grab it out. Marcus. Okay, so we'll go over these again at the end if you guys want, right?
What's this for?
So the first one, you guys, we're gonna want to adapt that one to Mr. Young's 4. Those are just some that I had obtained. Okay, but let's get into it. Those are the answers to the 5 questions that we just asked. All right, so you don't need to write them down. They're already done. Okay. All right. So we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. Right? If you've taken math and you've done exponential growth, right? Exponential growth always reaches what? A dotted line. What do you call that dotted line? Asymptote. An asymptote. So if we imagine the asymptote was God, right? We, the people, we are trying to create a government that is approaching that asymptote. We know we'll never get to it, but we're trying to reach that number. We know it's impossible to get to perfect, but we're trying to create a more perfect union. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Right? Now, this is the in order to understand this Declaration of Independence, we also have to look back a little bit at the Revolutionary War and what brought us to revolution. The key that you guys have to take from the lecture today is that a revolution, this was not a revolution made, but prevented. And we're going to get into that. That was Edmund Burke. He was in reference to the Glorious Revolution of 1688. All right? So, tyranny of King George III. Right? We just went through some of his abuses and the grievances that the United States had against him. Okay? And here's a quote from the Declaration of Independence. Right? It's saying that there was a long train of abuses. More importantly, it's important to understand, one, is the United States felt like we were being picked on. We were being singled out in these taxes and in these acts. Because we were. All right? He's saying, and also in this, it says, to reduce them under a despotism, a type of government of basically a tyrannical ruler. It is their right, and it's almost like restating it. It is their duty. It's their right, meaning that you have the right to stand up against somebody who's abusing you. But it's also your duty to stand up against a despot, right? An absolute monarch who is abusing you and your people. And it's important that we understand, in the Constitution, in the preamble, it says, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and who? Our posterity. So it's our duty. Now, if you were to think about it today, what is your duty for your posterity? You have a duty in your life to stand up against tyranny, okay? To stand up against certain things for your children or the children of your friends, right? For posterity, okay? More tyranny, right? The struggle which ended triumphantly for the American patriots was in truth part of the same struggle that was carried out in England by other patriots. The English parliamentarians, William Pitt, Edmund Burke, were the allies of Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and George Washington. There were people in England who realized that what was going on and realized that it was an abuse of natural rights. All right? So, British policies became stricter. Okay? What brought about, this revolution? Does anybody remember what one of the biggest causes to economic policies in 1700? What major event? See, 60 years before, 1660, 1680, they made rules that said, everything that goes to America has to be on a British ship. That upset the Americans, but it wasn't enough to separate from. And there were more, laws that kept coming for the Americans to make sure that Britain got more money from the American economy. But what happened in later 1700s, okay, after 1750, a major event happened that changed the relationship between America and Britain. Does anybody remember what that was?
Boston Tea Party.
Okay, the Boston Tea Party happened after this. Before this, England says, look, for the most part, we're going to leave you guys alone, let you guys grow. After this, England says, look, you got to pay up. You exist so that we can be wealthy. What major event happened?
Economic growth in there.
7 Years' War.
Okay, very good. The French and Indian War. What happened in the 7 Years' War? Does anybody remember what happened? America, or the colonies, were attacked by the French and the Indians. England came and protected us. Now, England was us. It would be like if somebody attacked California and the U.S. Army came, right, and defended us, and then they charged California 75% taxes. That's not fair. We're part of the United States. We've been paying our taxes, right? There's no reason why we should have to pay extra. We're a country. The reason why we exist as a country is so that you protect us. And so this is one of the big objections that they have, is the fact that England came to protect them. That's why they were getting taxed, right? Because of the French and Indian War, all right? Colonists felt that the king and parliament had gone too far, okay? Taxation without representation, right? Even more so, if Congress taxed us, at least we would feel like, well, at least we had a say in the matter. But if Congress taxed us without even allowing our Californians to vote, then we would have a problem. Violation of individual rights. What are some of the violations? If you committed a crime here, you might be sent to England to be tried. Okay? These are against the rights of Englishmen established by the Magna Carta in 1215. So these rights being abused, okay, individual rights, rights as a group, taxation without representation, individual rights, and interfering with self-government. If somebody committed a crime, they wouldn't allow the colonial government to take care of it. Okay? They were sending soldiers to come and keep the peace, if you will, or to enforce the laws. Now, does anybody know what it's called in the United States if the military were to come and rule the streets in California? Like if Donald Trump were to send the military, the army, to come and be the police in LA. Like let's say there were riots and stuff like this. Does anybody know what that's called? You've probably heard it before, but...
Totalitarianism.
No. There's a law, there's a rule. The president can use this power. He can send the military, okay, under certain circumstances to keep the peace. It's like after the Civil War. The Union sent soldiers down into the South to keep the peace. Didn't really keep the peace. Actually might have made the matters worse. But, nonetheless, it's a right that the president has. Does anybody know what that right is called?
No.
Martial law. Okay, martial law is if the president wants to keep the peace, or he needs to keep the peace because there's riots or anything like that, he can send the military in to keep the peace because the police don't have enough force. Okay? So that was one of the things that they were doing. But here's the problem. There weren't any riots. There weren't any things like that. They weren't rebelling yet. Okay? And so, you know, things would come up, like the Boston Massacre, but the soldiers were already there. The martial law was already happening. So this is one of the abuses that they have. Abusing his power, right? So, lastly, for tyranny, unfair trials. Okay, unfair trials pretty much explains itself. What would happen is you'd go back to England and they would present the case before you, probably say a bunch of lies, and then you stand there and you say like, they're lying, this is all not true. All right, prove it. How are you going to prove it? You have no one there to defend you. You say like, well, so-and-so was there. Okay, so we're going to send a ship to go get him and bring him back? No. That's it, you're in prison.
That's
Now,
why it's innocent until proven guilty.
That was one of the laws, but that wasn't the case. They were assumed guilty, right? Even though as an Englishman, that was one of your rights from the Magna Carta, innocent until proven guilty. Also, habeas corpus. That means that you have to be present when you're convicted. They would have a case, a trial, you wouldn't even be there, and they would come and say, yeah, we already had the trial, and you missed it. You're going to jail. What? Right? So this is what was happening. Imagine having your father, your mother, your son, these people taken away, okay, over a disagreement, and no trial, none of the rights that you have as Englishmen. This is why the people are upset. Now, when I was younger, I was in an accident. It was my fault. The accident was my fault. I was getting on the freeway, and there was a car in front of me, an SUV in front of me, and the SUV swerved out of the way. There was like one of those stop signs, but there was two lanes. The carpool people could go, but the right lane had to stop at a stop sign. I don't know if you've seen one of those. Anyways, there was a car just dead stopped at the stop sign, and it was an SUV, so I couldn't see over it, right? And so I'm just accelerating, getting on the freeway, and they swerve out, and I hit the brakes, and it was like the Millennium Falcon just getting sucked into the Death Star. I was like turning the wheel like this, and my car just kept sliding. Like, I felt like it was 100 yards, right? Because I'm getting on the freeway, I'm accelerating. And and the person's just sitting there, I'm like, oh no. And so like I brace myself, I get there, and it's like, you know, like I'd slowed down a lot, and I hit it, right? And my dinky little car, airbag goes off right in my face. Doesn't hit me or anything like that. Like, I'm like this, you know? And the guy's like an old car, and a huge rubber bumper, you know, those like super thick rubber bumpers, old school. Okay, so we pull over, and you know, we exchange information. My car actually still drives, but the windshield shattered from the airbags, right? And so we have a court case. My insurance company kept reaching out, trying to like see the car and get pictures of his car and all this kind of stuff. And so he comes with this huge fabricated case in court. And I'm sitting there, like, with pictures of my car, pictures of his car from the accident, right? And he starts saying, like, my head hit the windshield, I was, you know, covered in blood, I didn't think about taking pictures of myself. My legs were all lacerated. And I'm like, I'm talking to the judge, I'm like, if I had all these lacerations, wouldn't I have gone to the doctor? Wouldn't I have gone to the hospital or something? But like, or had a scar or something to show for it. And so all this fabrication and, you know, he ends up getting a decent amount of money from the insurance company, right? It wasn't my money, it's the insurance company that had to pay. But I just walked, at the very end, what I said to the judge was, I was like, it's just sickening that somebody could come in here and just make up a bunch of stuff, and if he wins, right, it's like, what kind of justice is there, right? And so you can imagine, that's a tiny, tiny little thing that happened in my life. But imagine if it was like your dad getting taken away, or your son getting taken away, right? You would be super furious, right? And when this happened over and over and over and over again, enough was enough, all right? So, just to give you guys, we have in 1765, right? The Stamp Act is issued by Parliament requiring colonists to purchase and affix stamps on legal and commercial documents. The 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, ended in 1763, okay? So this is 2 years later, they say, all right, it's time to start paying us back, okay? Congress, according to their charters, the colonies were only under authority of the king and not Parliament. The Act ignored established government, attempted to use the unlawful body to impose pretended legislation, and violated English right of no taxation without representation. In response, the Congress issued a Declaration of Rights and Grievances. Okay, so one quick important thing. When the colonies came originally, right, you have Jamestown. Okay? Jamestown came from King James I, right? Jamestown was named Jamestown after King James I. Their charter was basically, the king was sending them to the New World to settle and create a place, a colony. Okay? Now, this colony, Jamestown, is under the rule or the protection of the king. Parliament, which is like the Congress of Great Britain, right? Parliament was not involved in any of the laws in the New World. They never had been. They had no jurisdiction. It would be like a Santa Monica police officer going to Arizona and pulling someone over. It's out of his range, out of his jurisdiction. This was the king's jurisdiction. Okay? So when the Parliament created laws requiring them to pay taxes like the Stamp Act and all the other acts, all of this is what's called pretended legislation. It's like they create a law that's outside their jurisdiction, right? Hoping that the people would just obey the law. Okay? But here's the problem. When the people stood up against the law, the king sent soldiers to enforce the law. Okay? So it's just one thing after another. Alright? First time that this large number of colonies united to protest the British action. Okay? In a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, this is the American colonies getting together and sending a letter to the king saying, look, these are problems, sending the letter to Congress, Parliament. These are issues. This is wrong. You're violating our individual rights, and you're violating our rights as colonies. Okay?
How big was the colonies compared to the Britain at the time?
What do you mean, how big?
Like population-wise?
It would have been much smaller. Probably like...
25, 75?
No, it would have been like... I mean, if you were to talk about the English Empire, right, at that time it was like the sun never sets on the English Empire. So if you're talking about the whole empire, you would talk about the colonies in like Australia, you talk about, you know, in Africa, you talk about colonies all over the world. Okay, but if you're just talking about the island of England, right, if you will, I would say probably like 10%. The colonies were about 10% the size of all of England. Yes?
Okay, I'm not understanding what the Stamp Act, I don't understand it.
Okay, so the Stamp
Shut
Act,
up.
so the Stamp Act would be like anything that you purchase, it's almost like a sales tax, okay? But anything that requires any sort of paper, mailing, anything like that, that you'd have to put a stamp on it, and that stamp costs money. Today, we think, oh, it's just, you put a stamp on your mail and you pay for that, right? You pay to send it, okay? But back then, anything that you purchased for paper would be considered, any paper goods, you'd have to pay a Stamp Act tax, okay? Levi, do you have a better explanation?
If you don't pay, you don't mail.
It wasn't just mail. It's anything that you purchase that's paper, okay? All right. So, Declaration of Rights and Grievances. This is the letter that's sent to the king. First, His Majesty's subject in the colonies on the same allegiance to the crown of Great Britain that is owing from his subjects born within the realm. Okay? Second, 2D, that His Majesty's liege subjects in the colonies are entitled to the inherent rights and privileges of his natural born subjects within the Kingdom of Great Britain. I want to stop there, okay? This is something you guys cannot miss in this. You cannot miss in this revolution. Is the fact that they are saying, we are Englishmen. We have rights. You are violating those rights. Simple. Just as simple as that. All right. So, you guys see that? You have to be able to pick this up. We are, look, His Majesty's subjects in the colonies are entitled to the rights and privileges of the natural born subjects, meaning the subjects in Great Britain. Saying we are Englishmen, we have rights from the Magna Carta, and you have to, if you will, respect those rights. Okay? The rights as Englishmen that no taxes should be imposed on them, but with their own consent, given personally or by their representatives. Does somebody want to explain that one? Want to try? It's okay if you get it wrong.
Yeah, no taxes should be imposed. They just need their representatives.
Okay, then you can't be taxed unless you have your own personal say in the matter or a representative, meaning consent. Okay, yes, you can tax me.
So representatives were there in England, but they didn't have representatives in the colonies?
No, they didn't. They didn't allow them to go to England to represent them. That was one of the things. Saying, hey, listen, you can tax us, but let us send somebody to England to represent us. And to say, like, for example, if the federal government looks at you in California and says, look, if you make more than $12,000 a year, you're pretty well off. You're in California, you're like, no, you can't even survive here, right? So we make minimum wage, right? Minimum wage in the government, in the country, is much lower than minimum wage in California. Why? Because the cost of living is greater. So to be in the colonies, we need to be able to send somebody to England to say, hey, listen, our cost of living, or this is how our lifestyle is, okay? You can't tax us on all this, right? What if a tax was so great that all of a sudden your company was now negative, right? You just created a company and you're making good money, right? Because you have a good profit margin, but all of a sudden, these taxes cut out your whole profit margin and now you're negative. So now you can't have your company anymore because of the taxes, okay? The people of these colonies are not, and from their local circumstances, cannot be represented in the House of Commons in Great Britain. Okay? Saying we don't have representation, and we can't have representation. Why was representation in the House of Commons, right? That's in Great Britain, that's Parliament. Why could they not be represented? Even if we sent somebody there, why would that not be good enough?
Because there'd only be one person.
And that person wouldn't be what?
It could be outvoted.
Well, not even
They wouldn't
just
be
that.
representing, they wouldn't have their interest.
They wouldn't be living there. Right? They wouldn't be living in the colonies. They wouldn't know what the colonies' problems and circumstances are. Does that make sense? So they can't go back and forth. Right? They would have to live here and then send a message, which wouldn't really work out. The only representatives of the people of the colonies are persons chosen therein by themselves, and that no taxes ever have been or can be constitutionally imposed on them, but in their respective legislators, saying that in the colonies we have legislatures where we impose taxes. Okay? So you can't come and add taxes on top of that. Okay? Moving quickly, representatives from every colony except Georgia assembled in Philadelphia, right? They were responding to the intolerable acts, all right? The intolerable acts, things like the Boston Port Act, Massachusetts Government Act, Administration of Justice Act, Quartering Act, and Quebec Act. Right? One of the most egregious ones is the Quartering Act. Does anybody remember what the Quartering Act is?
Yeah. Isn't it where like the soldiers get to stay in your house?
Yeah. You show up one night, you say, hey, listen, I'm taking your bed.
Heck no.
And you had to. Right? This reminds me back to like when Rome controlled Israel, and you've heard going the extra mile. Right? That comes from back in Roman Empire times. If a Roman soldier, saw a Hebrew or a Jew, he could say, here, carry my bags. And by law, that Jew had to carry them for 1 mile. So going the extra mile is basically saying to the person who's oppressing you, look, it doesn't matter how much you try and burden me, it's not going to faze me. I'll go ahead and carry it another mile. Right? I'm happy to do it. Okay? And that's what going the extra mile comes from. It's much more than just going a little bit above and beyond. Right? It was way above, way beyond. You would already be angry and mad, right? So you can think about the Quartering Act, right? That these people just coming in and taking their right, which is to take your house or your bed. All right, so Independence Hall, those of you who went on the East Coast, we saw Independence Hall. We weren't actually able to go in, okay, to see where it was signed.
Oh, yeah.
But that is Independence Hall,
Oh,
right? The First Continental Congress met there, right? And this was the response to the intolerable acts, right? So, they protested Parliament's interference. Important to understand that Parliament had no control, so Parliament shouldn't be making laws. Petition for the redress of these grievances, okay? This is like an olive branch saying, hey, listen, we don't want to separate from you guys. Please, take our the grievances, take them serious, let's fix them, okay? Called all colonists to boycott British goods. Okay, so you've heard of a boycott of certain goods, right? Certain companies that might use unfair practices in creating clothing, right? They might use sweatshops or stuff like this. Many people, especially in Santa Monica in our area, are very aware of where the clothes come from and whether or not those clothes are made in a fair environment. So you'll see like fair trade. Are people getting paid wages that are fair? Okay, so in order to do this, we boycotted all British goods. Okay? So they bring their goods, and we're not going to buy those goods. We're only going to buy goods from America. Try and, make them pay economically. We called for a second Congress the following May. So listen, we're going to send this letter, and we're going to ask that they pull back those taxes, and we're also going to schedule another meeting in a year to see if anything changes. Okay? So, the shot heard around the world. In the time from this Continental Congress, right? In April, so they're meeting in May, right? In April, there's a munitions storing. They're storing up ammunition, guns, bullets, all this kind of stuff. They're storing it up just in case they need to defend themselves. The British soldiers find out about it, and they're going to go take the munitions. Paul Revere rides through the night, gets there in the morning, and he says, hey, the British are coming, okay? And so they get ready. They actually are a little bit late, so the British push them back from Lexington. They push them back to Concord, and the British are actually shocked because they're able to defend themselves at Concord, okay? And that is the shot heard around the world. Why is it the shot heard around the world? It's the beginning of
The war.
the Revolutionary War, okay? So the Second Continental Congress, May 1775. All 13 colonies assemble, and what do we create? Right? We create a government, okay, under the Articles of Confederation. Okay? They put George Washington, Commander-in-Chief, okay, issued money, right? Petition for the redresses of grievances. So this is the second time now we are sending a letter saying, hey, take these grievances back. All right? Please, stop doing this. Okay? Stop taxing us. Give us representation. Right? All of these things. The British's response, King declares the colonies in a state of rebellion and virtually declares war on them. That's his response to their second petition. He says they're in rebellion. Okay? Why? Because they went to take the guns, they defended themselves, they sent this letter saying stop, and he says, all right, they're in rebellion. Okay? Issues Prohibitory Act. Okay? So here's a picture of the document that George III sent, right? He bans all trade from British companies to the colonies. Removes colonies from the king's protection. What would that be? So that maybe the French and Indian want to come back and take over again. Okay? Again, Independence Hall. Moving into the Declaration. This is the second part of our... so the Declaration of Independence is the breakup of the United States and Great Britain.
Can I use the restroom, please?
Yes. Little video.
Wow, I love that island.
Sorry.
I'm so confused. Oh. What?
Colonized America, we won't stand for tyranny. Okay, and it's too late to apologize. It's too late. I said it's too late to apologize. It's too late. Foolish guys with the ads and they just won't do. Wanna make it clear we believe this much is true. All men were created with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's too late to apologize. It's too late. I said it's too late to apologize. It's too late.
Wow, singing along with it. I was. You missed it. The words have to do with that. Oh, is that Ben Franklin? Yeah. How long is the Revolutionary War? We watched it again.
75 to 81.
No.
70 to
6
75.
years?
Wow.
No, it's not. Wait, it was still going on after 1776?
Yeah. 76 is just the beginning. All right, let's finishes up, so
Dismissed.
Declaration of Independence.
Oh,
right?
this one has like 50 slides.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
1, 2,
We got like
Is
10,
that the
we got like
different
10
one?
left. We got like 10 left, don't worry.
and
Declaration of Independence, I'll break up letter, right? Listen, we can move through this quickly because we already read it. Okay, but just understand the important things, right? Henry Lee motions for declaring independence June 7th, so a little more than a month. Right after that, we start writing it up. We start thinking about, okay, if we're going to declare independence, right, we need to create it, look at it, revise it. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson starts writing it, I believe, June 11th. Okay, and he is, if you will, we call George Washington the father of our country. Thomas Jefferson is the father of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, and James Madison, the father of the Constitution, right? But beginning drafting on June 11th, July 4th, the Declaration of Independence is unanimously adopted by the Second Continental Congress. Okay? So, understand, we have just declared independence. Why did we declare independence? Any thoughts? Why did we need to separate from England?
Because they weren't doing anything to help us.
Okay, but what did we
They
need?
were claiming us their citizens while violating all our citizens.
Okay, so all of those reasons are true, and those are the grievances. But think about it strategically. England is sending, they've called us in rebellion, basically declaring war on us. They're sending troops and soldiers, okay? Do we have the troops and soldiers to beat the strongest country in the world?
No.
No, we don't. So what do we need?
Need allies.
And we can't secure allies as a part of England.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? The only way we can secure allies is if we separate. Right? So England says they're no longer under protection, and we say, yeah, we're separating. We're a different country, and we can now get allies. Okay? So, human equality, right? All men are created equal. This is one of the major themes. Natural rights. These are rights that are natural to all mankind, but governments are just there to protect them. All right? The purpose of government is to what? We just said it. What is the purpose of government? Okay. To protect the rights that were given by God.
Inalienable.
Right? The human equality, right? All we're created with certain inalienable rights, right? Those rights states what the rights are, but also it says governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the governed. Okay? The right of revolution. Basically, we read about it in the Declaration of Independence. I mentioned it. It says that it is not, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security, right? Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, saying we've been patiently waiting for them to right these wrongs, and they haven't. Okay? Now, Taylani asked in the reading of the Declaration of Independence about the line, prudence indeed will dictate the governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. What they're saying is, you don't just start a revolution for anything. Okay? And ultimately, this wasn't a revolution, because what is a revolution? Someone? What do you think of when you think of a revolution?
war.
War? Okay. Okay.
An
Think about,
awakening.
what?
An awakening.
Okay, well think about like the British or French revolutions. Do you guys remember what happened in those? In all of history, when there's a change of government, how does it usually happen?
Fight.
What? Whoever's in charge, whoever the king is, they get overthrown or killed. Right? That's a revolution. Right? In Russia, right? They took out the existing government. Are we trying to overthrow the British government? Are the colonies trying to overthrow the British government? No. We don't want to be the king of Britain. We don't want to take their place. We're in a sense like a civil war. We are separating from England. Okay? And the Declaration of Independence talks about the abuses of power, right? The grievances, which we already talked about. So there's three parts to the Declaration of Independence. First, the introduction. Okay? Think about it. The introduction ends on page 6, line 10, right? saying facts submitted to the world. We're declaring independence to the world, right? And he goes on to mention all of the different grievances of the king and parliament, right? Explains the rights and the role of government. First 2 paragraphs, right? Part 2, the list of abuses, okay? The grievances against the king, and finally on page 8, line 23, right? We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assemble, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions to do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, right? They are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, right? So this is the closing paragraph, okay? We are declaring independence. Absolving, meaning destroying, eliminating all connections to the crown, okay? This is the last paragraph. That is free and independent states, they have full power to 1, levy war, 2, conclude peace, 3, contract alliances, 4, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge together our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. All right, famous quote from the Revolutionary War was, listen, if we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately. Meaning, if we don't stick together, we're going to be hanging from the gallows. All right? So, king's abuse of power, charges 1 through 12 refer to his executive abuse of power. All right? King and parliament acting together. Right? Charges 13 through 22 attack the king for combining with others, parliament, to subject America to a variety of unconstitutional measures. Remember, I've already said it once and twice. Why is this illegal? Because parliament has no power, no jurisdiction over the colonies. Okay, that is the king's power. So the king has abused his power, but then also he's combined with parliament to create fake laws that are out of his jurisdiction. Okay? The king's war crimes, thirdly, charges 23 through 27, assail the king's violence and cruelty in waging war against his American subjects, and violation of rights. Other charges talk about economic interest, infringement of colonial self-government, and violation of individual rights. These are like the taxes. Okay? So the taxes are, if you will, fourth in priority on this list. Okay? So when I say pretended legislation, we're talking about parliament, no legislation, no authority. Okay? In a police chase, who is usually chasing the police? Who's usually chasing a stolen car? Not just police, because police don't have jurisdiction on the freeways. Who?
Helicopters.
Okay, helicopters are working to help.
Yeah.
The sheriff or the highway patrol. These are state people. Why? Because if a guy travels out of a city, no longer do those police officers have jurisdiction. Now, sometimes, if he travels far, you would get a helicopter from LAPD that might call in and say, hey, we're traveling into your airspace. Do we have permission? Yes, you have permission, of course. Boom. Done. Right? All right. So, the reasons for this declaration, 1, to secure foreign alliances. As I mentioned, we need an alliance, an ally in this war if we're going to win. Who is the ally that ends up helping us win the war in 1781? France, right? So England is trapped in this spot. If they bring ships, they can get their army out, or they can protect themselves. They can bring food and supplies. What does France do? France seals off the harbor, and so they have to surrender. Okay? Inform the colonies of the crown's actions. Right? How do the colonists know what's been happening in the colonies? Well, we have to issue all these abuses that have been going on in various different colonies. And lastly, preclude any colonial sentiment toward reconciliation with England. Originally, all of the colonists did not want to declare independence. Okay? They didn't want to declare independence. They wanted to stay as Englishmen. Now, After this, it's basically saying, look, it's not happening. We are separating. Okay? And you still have people who want to be a part of England. Those are called Tories. Essentially, people who are scared that England's going to win the war, and they are...
Like in that show we watched,
Yeah.
Scaredy Fools.
Okay? So, discuss the Christian elements found in the Declaration of Independence. Right? We went over this. Let's go over them. What are they?
Inalienable rights.
Christian elements. Okay? Supreme Creator God. Right? It does talk about equal rights.
Three branches.
Okay, those that came from Montesquieu, the separation of power. But yes, the three branches of government come from Isaiah 33:22. God is our judge, our king, our lawgiver, and our judge. That is judicial, executive, and legislative branches. Okay, He is the supreme judge of the world. Right? We are looking for divine providence to help us. Okay.
Isaiah what?
It says, which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. Right? So we're saying that there's laws of nature and there is nature's God. So the first principle would be that there is a God. Second principle would be that He is a creator. Our creator God. He is a supreme judge. Ultimately, He is the ruler. Okay? He is the judge of the world.
What verse is it again?
Verse...
33 what?
So it would be verse 4, and this is on page...
No, the Isaiah.
page 33:22.
Thanks. Wait, and what does it say?
So it says, God is our king, our lawgiver, and our judge.
Thanks.
So here's the four parts, right? The separate and equal station in which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator. That means our rights come from our creator. Okay? Thirdly, that God is the supreme judge of the world. And lastly, right, we are looking for the support, protection from divine providence. Okay? So, as I mentioned, when we think of a revolution, I've already said all this. As a revolution, when we think about a revolution, what do we think about? Maybe you don't think about this, but what is a revolution? An overthrow of command. In this case, are we overthrowing the command?
Yeah.
No, King George was still King George after the revolution. Nothing changed. Okay? We didn't overthrow it, we separated. So this isn't a revolution. This is, in a sense, a revolution that was avoided. We prevented a revolution. Because eventually, it would have gotten so bad that we might have thought, well, we have to overthrow this government. No. We tried to avoid it. How did we try to avoid it?
By sending representation.
What did we call it? It was called the
Grievances.
list of grievances. Okay, we sent it to the crown. Then what did we do a second time? Another list of grievances. And then what did the king do after the second time we tried to restore the relationship? He said, they're in rebellion. Alright? So after he said they're in rebellion, okay, right, we have the shot heard around the world, and then we have the Declaration of Independence that says, look, guys, we tried this twice. We tried to make it right. We asked you nicely, but now we just have to separate. Okay? And we don't take this lightly. It's not... Small things are not a reason for a revolution or to separate. Okay? So here it is. The American Revolution was not a revolution made, but prevented. King George III began imposing tyranny over the American colonies and Great Britain itself. His actions were unbecoming of an English monarch. Violating the colonial forms of government and basic rights guaranteed to all subjects, the colonists exercised their rights and duty of petition for redress of grievances. So that was the first thing. They exercised their rights and duties of petition. King George defied the petitions, continuing his tyranny, right? The colonists were faced with the choice of relinquishing their long-established English rights to absolute tyranny or separate themselves to which English law in itself entitled them. Okay? Now, I just want to mention, okay, in Scotland, right, there was a quote when Scotland got their independence from England. And the quote is, basically, no honest man gives up his freedom without his life. Okay? And that's, a lot of Scottish people are American, they're immigrants at this time, right? So we listen to the song. Now it's too late. George III, right? So here's your homework. Okay? I don't know if you guys want to write it down. Read and annotate the Declaration of Independence. In part 2 of the Declaration, draw a square around the 5 worst abuses. In your opinion, rank them 1 to 5. 1 being the very worst, and 5 being the least, right? Write your ranking numbers in the margin. This is in your book, okay? If you don't have your book, you'll need to print it out and write it. In part 3 of the Declaration, write keywords or phrases in the margin next to the paragraph that represent the main concepts in this section. Okay? Any questions about your homework? Listen, we kind of already did this, right? You were listing a few of the grievances on that study guide, that worksheet I gave you, right? I gave you an answer sheet. So some of that you already have, okay, in terms of the grievances. But this is your opinion of the grievances, which is worst in your mind. Now, I understand some of you might not even understand. You get that? I understand. You might not understand what the grievance is actually saying. Okay? So, it's important to understand what the grievance is saying.
I can't read and understand at the same time, okay?
You can read it twice. So read it first to read it, and then you read it again.
But then
to
you still
understand.
won't understand it because when you keep reading it, you won't be able to understand it. Afterwards, you'll be able to understand it, but you
Yeah.
won't
I
be
would
able
talk
to read
to
it.
comprehend, bro.
Yeah, right. So, any questions about the homework? No?
No.
Have a good
Wait,
one.
Thank you.
I believe we're watching a video on this tomorrow.
Martin says it.
In the book?
Here's like, yeah, box around, the grievance.
I don't think you're so on right now. I think well, I don't know.
Alright, you guys are dismissed.
Hey, Marcus, send an email.
You might,
No, send the email to Chester right now.
right? And then you put a number, so
The
this is
email.
first worse.
This already texted me, he's like, y'all, when I find out the lesson plan, I'll email you what it is. So.
No, wait, he texted you.
Yeah, email me back.